Hello, everybody. Back here with another episode of our podcast, So Much More Than Stardust. My name is Wakas, and I'm your host. And for your pleasure and my edification, we have as our guest today, Sasha Radicic. And Sasha is, among other things, an accomplished luthier. And our conversation today is about guitars. I have loved guitars ever since I first came of age. And today, most of my questions about guitar making, why guitars sound the way they do, have been answered by Sasha. I hope you enjoy this conversation as much as Raj and I did. Oh, and by the way, Raj is going to be my co-host today because he's more knowledgeable about guitars than I am to help me with relevant and insightful questions. Thank you very much. Gentlemen, welcome, and a special welcome to Sasha Radicic. My name is Wakas, and for today, I am one of the hosts for this episode. I have to begin by saying the last time we talked, I was a little discombobulated because of certain things that are going on in my own life. So if the beginning and the end was a little rough, it was because I'd just gotten some news that I wasn't particularly enamored with. So you'll forgive me for that. And that's also one of the reasons that I tapped one of the guests on a previous podcast, Raj, to join us today and help me today by being a co-host on this episode. For today, Raj Swaminathan, Dr. Raj, is going to join me. And while we have this conversation with one of Raj's older friends who is joining us today, his name is Sasha Radicic. We'll let Raj introduce him and go from there. I hope you enjoy this conversation.
Thanks, Wakas, and good morning, Sasha. Always good to see you.
Good morning, Raj.
So, falling in line with, what Wakas has been doing, in these podcasts, it's always interesting to see what people do for a living. And I think we can all agree that, the people who create something out of nothing or seemingly nothing, that is always not only an interesting thing, but an admirable thing. I'm talking about the musicians, the authors, the painters, the sculptors. A musician friend once said, when asked, what he did for a living, he said, "I carve air." And, to say that what Sasha does for a living, which is the art of luthierie, or to say that he carves something out of wood would be a great understatement. So in the next hour, I think not only will we have the privilege of getting to know Sasha and his craft, but also a little bit about him and how he arrived where he is today. So Sasha, welcome, and it is a pleasure and honor to have you here today.
Thank you very much. I'm really honored to be here.
Thank you for joining us. And before we embark on your career in lutherie, which, I did some research, and it's pronounced both luthierie and lutherie.
Lutherie is what I
use.
use, yes.
Yeah. I would like our listeners to perhaps hear a little bit about, your personal story. You started, like all of us did here, at least in the room, in another country, in a different part of this globe. So
Yes.
would you tell us a little bit about where you were born and, what your life was like?
Yeah, I was born in state of Bosnia and Herzegovina. That was former Yugoslavia back then. So I grew up in Sarajevo. This is the capital of Bosnia. And about 1980, I started to get into the making instruments. At the age of 9 or so, maybe 10, I started to play music only because my father, he was a mechanic, really good mechanic.
A car mechanic?
Car mechanic, yes. But in the evening hours, a guy would always play the classical guitar. He was like have music sheets on a table and like playing Tarega and other composers. And I used to listen to that and watch that, and I got intrigued by the sound, by the pieces and everything. And he started to teaching me a few things. And the music was magical, really. And later on, as I would play more and more and learn more pieces, I got to be interested, this is just like a piece of wood with the strings stretched over the top, and, there's the sides and neck, and it was just like, how is this working? I was interested in the physics of it. Mm-hmm. How come it's the air is the medium for the noise, for the
propagation of sound.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that was fascinating to me. I would often peek through the sound hole and what is inside?
Yeah. I think most of us have done that. And, I think when you first pick up a guitar, and you pick up a guitar, well, I picked up a guitar because I was fascinated by the variety of sound that can come from what appears to be, when you're talking about a 6-string acoustic guitar, a very simplistic instrument, right?
Yes.
And then you start exploring it, and most of us have lost picks inside that hole. And while you're trying to figure it out, then you look at the bracing and you go like, "Wow, there's like stuff inside." And then you start exploring.
Oh, yeah.
So you spoke about Tárrega, and he classically, he's composed a lot of music specifically for the guitar.
Yes.
Yeah, and while a lot of the other music that we listen to, Bach, etc., has been transposed or made to suit guitar, because as we know, scores classically transcribed don't really fit for the guitar, because you can pick the same note several different locations on the neck. So were you aided in your studies or in your learning the guitar? Did you have recordings of the music? Or
good question. Yes, I did. We actually didn't have a very many. We're talking about the real record,
right?
Vinyl.
Yes.
Yes, I did have. It was a local guy who was a real well-known in my hometown. His name was Ivan. Mm-hmm. In my language, it's Ivan. Yeah, Ivan Kalcina. Now I remember. Mm. And that was a really, really good player. And that's the only record I had. But it was amazing player. So yeah, that was it pretty much.
So maybe you could tell us a little bit about the musical influences, the local. I mean, most of us, like I grew up in Pakistan, so most of the music I heard was the Indian Pakistani music that was popular. And then, as time went on and I enjoyed it, I started digging more into the classical ragas, as they're called, which are,
right.
scales and improvisation on those scales.
Right.
So was there similar music available to you that you'd grown up listening to, maybe on the radio, or, just part of your cultural heritage?
Regarding the instrument itself, which is guitar, I was, like I said, first in contact with my father, who was playing. So that was my first encounter with the music. So it's a classical guitar. That was it. But later, as I was growing up, we are Balkans, right? That's the region. That's a Balkan. It's called Balkans. And we have so many influences from all left and right, up and down. Mm-hmm. So we have a lot of Oriental music influence, like from Turkey, from Egypt, from Syria, and also from Russia, from Northeast, and also at the same time, like from Germany. So we had all kind of impacts from each side, which is a good thing. Mm-hmm. I think now that I'm thinking about it, I picked up everything from everywhere, and that's good. I just don't like one kind of music. I very much enjoy Oriental music, and that's in all mellows. I mean, deeply, what's the word, intertwined or something, woven through. But we also have a Western impact in music. So it's a very rich and complex.
What was the moment, Sasha, where you realized or felt, you were talking about that connection between actually listening to the sound of music and then playing the music and then making that step into, well, I want to learn how these instruments are put together?
Excellent question.
What was your journey that
excellent
happened
question.
after that?
Basically, at that time, so we talked about the 70s, 80s, right? We didn't have very much money. So it was kind of rare to see someone to have like a Fender Stratocaster or Ramirez guitar. That was pretty expensive, right? Not everybody can afford that stuff. So I would, play whatever we had. And my dad, he bought a brand new guitar, and I'm thinking that was East Germany made classical guitar or something. I don't even remember what was the brand, but it was decent sounding guitar. And then as you play that guitar and you handle it like every day, every month, you start to get to know the sound of it. And you get accustomed like, well, this is a good sound, or this is okay sound, or this is, bad sound. Now, I realized it's okay. I mean, I don't know how to explain it, but I feel the sound could be better. Now, how could I get a better sound? So I go like, if I want a better sound, I gotta be a Ramirez or something, or like a Stratocaster, and then you come to a conclusion like, okay, I just can't afford that stuff because it's too expensive. So, and then I would watch my dad. He was making a furniture also in the free time, apart from being car mechanic. Mm-hmm. So he had a lot of skills with wood too. He was not just this, steel guy doing like wheels and like pistons and whatever. He was very skilled with the wood, sharpening tools. And that was the first moment that I was like, maybe what I'm just playing, this guitar, maybe I can make one. Why not? I mean, that's quite possible. So that was interesting. Like I toyed with that idea, and then later I told him, and he went to some business trip with some guys to western part of the Bosnia, and I said, look, if you come across those lumber yards, maybe you can pick it up like a piece of maple for me, like so I can try to make some. And he did. He come back from the trip, and he brought like I remember it was like a 120 centimeters log of maple. It was like 3-inch thick and like, 12 inches wide. No nut on it. It was perfect. Mm-hmm. So that was my first piece to, cut and carve.
Let me interrupt you here for a second. At that time when your dad was woodworking, was he using power tools at all, or was it all manual?
Interestingly enough, he did make some power tools to process the wood, to cut. Uh-huh. Like a table saw, for example, and joiner. Yeah, he did make those too. So being car mechanic, he knows steel, and yeah, he made those tools, yes.
And I ask you this because I have always been fascinated by people who work with their hands ever since I was a kid.
Me too, believe me.
And I have always, when I was a kid, I would stop by a roadside cobbler, the people who do the shoes and put new soles on the shoes and stuff.
Yeah.
And I would watch them do the knots and, how their hands would work, and they're working with the awl and stuff. And I was amazed by it. And I remember there was a time when there were some woodworkers who were making some furniture, and, this is the old world. So they would bring the wood and they would make like beds and stuff, at the location. And they would work with the hand saws. They would work with the plane. And I remember I asked them to show me how to use the wood planer, the one that you use with your hand, and just trying to get that stroke right. And, I was never going to be a woodworker, but I just thought it was amazing that people could use their hands and material and just craft something. And they didn't have plans or anything like that.
No.
They did it out of their head. They had an image, they had a vision, and they were able to make something solid out of it. So when you started making guitars, were you familiar with the technique at all?
No, I had no idea what I was doing.
Yeah.
I just know I didn't have enough money to buy one.
All right.
So that actually forced me to try to make one, and whatever the heck comes out of it, it will come out.
Which is very interesting because if you look at the history of the old African American blues players, especially down in the Delta, a lot of them were playing out of guitars made by hand out of tin cans.
Yes.
And, I guess the music is in us, and we learn how to let it out. And when we lack the tools for it, then we make the tools that allow us to do that. Mm-hmm. So that is amazing for me to hear.
To me too. Me too.
Yeah.
I just got a little bit better.
Yeah.
With years. That's it.
And I think the key thing that you said earlier is that you just wanted to make it sound better.
Mm-hmm.
And that to me is very interesting because, to me that would make one want to sort of delve into how the instrument works even in more detail. So at some point after you had done, something beyond even experimentation, but did you then take kind of formal tutelage?
That happened, yes, later in Germany, actually, when I moved. But it was an interesting question. Yes, I was handling that first guitar that I remember, and I was like, maybe it can sound better. And guess what? When I made the first one, it was horrible. It didn't sound like nothing I wanted. Nothing I wanted. And on the top of it, then you show it to somebody else, the friends, and and they go like, "Oh, this sucks." I was like, okay.
So there was not positive feedback.
That was a starting point of a long journey. Now go and learn. Really, when you want to get a better sound, go ahead and make it happen. It didn't really happen quickly. It took me a lot of years, many years. So when after the war broke out, I moved to Czech Republic and then to Germany, and then I had a luck to find a job at Munich instrument maker shop.
I see.
And that's where I learned a whole lot by just they pile up on me like a lot of repairs. They were making zitters, that German zitter.
Zitters.
You know what it is, right?
Yeah.
The one which lays on table.
Yeah.
And I had no idea what are those either.
Uh-huh.
So they pile up on me like tons of repairs, and I was learning actually through the contact with the, things that needs to be repaired. So that was kind of my luck too, to walk in and they would just give me opportunity to work, to live from,
So may I ask you this? There are different ways to learn how to make a musical instrument, right? There is an artisanal point of view where, because I love motorcycles in addition to guitars, right? And there is the performance aspect of it, and then there is the aesthetic aspect of it. So how fast does it go? How well does it handle?
Right.
And then how beautiful does it look when it's just parked there? And I think, a lot of us, when we are attracted towards guitars, we are attracted to the aesthetic beauty of them. How does the wood look? And what's the guitar look like? And what kind of, embellishments does it have? And then, we pick up, and the sound part of it is a little harder to appreciate. You pretty much have to be a musician or a music aficionado to understand the difference in sound for the guitars. So your emphasis was, in the beginning...
the look.
The look, okay.
Of course.
Yeah.
We are kind of all the same.
Yeah.
Yes, you're right. Look.
Yeah. And then you started focusing. Now, did you ever think about the physics part of it, in terms of,
No, that came later, actually.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's, I don't know where to begin, actually, but let's go back to the look of it. I mean, that's something that attracts you because we are creatures of seeing, smelling, feeling, right?
Okay, I got you.
So, yes, the guitar, the musical instrument, the guitar in my case, was something that was like physically, I'm attracted to that. What is it? It's, I don't know how to explain it, but it's beautiful, okay? And like I said before, picked it up, played it. Oh, it's interesting. I'm attached to it. I don't know why. I don't know if anybody knows actually why we are attached to that. We simply are the sound. And so I was many years attracted by the beauty of the instrument itself. And then later, when I was a little older, started to play with the, other people with the band and blah, blah, blah. I got very interested, like, how is it that this thing sounds the way it sounds? And there was quite a difference between like acoustic instrument and the electric, because there was electric guitars, basses, and everything. So the first one, remember when I said the piece of maple that my dad brought from west part of the state was a piece of maple. Little did I know that actually that piece of maple would be something today very sought after. So I actually was growing up in the state that actually has the best spruce for the tone wood, spruce for the tops, and maple for the back and sides, or, fiddles. So very fascinating all together. And I got interested how that the instrument actually is producing a sound. And in the beginning, mind, it's just I had no clue what I'm doing. I was trying to make something that already existed like many, many, many years. So my guitars were horrible in the beginning. No excuse. It's funny. And as I moved into, after the war, I moved into Germany, I started to realize like a complexity and the internal beauty of the construction. You get deeper into the parts. Why is it so?
But was there somebody at the shop who was sort of mentoring you or maybe introduced you?
Yeah, the owner, yes.
Okay. Yeah. Tell us a little bit about his influence on your passion.
Yeah, his name is Kurt Hartwig, by the way. He is a wonderful person, and wonderful because, I walked in his shop, and that was in 1992, I believe. And I just walked, I was looking for the job, and I walked in his shop, and I told him, I'm very interested in making instruments, and I know some little things about making instruments. I made a few, not very much, but he looked at me, he listened to me, and I didn't see encouragement in his eyes and his look, but I think he was interested in some way. I don't know why. So anyway, long story short, he opened a door for me and he said, we'll try you out for maybe a month or so. And then I guess I did something well. I stayed for 6 years at his service. So he was, big influence, of course, like I said, he would, give me some parts to make for the zither production. They were making probably like 20 or 30 a year for zithers for Japan, for example. And there was a lot of parts to be made. So I would be sanding tops and backs. And the people who were actually working in the shop, there's like 3 other people, and including the owner, Kurt, they had a lot of nerves, actually. They would be like hovering above me and showing me, like, you do this, show you this, how is the rosettes made, how long you have to cut the purfling to fit into the channel, and a million other things. So I'm very thankful. This is something, you have to be lucky to hit, such a circumstance and to meet such wonderful people. They have actually patience to work with me, because I'm not easy to work with, honestly.
I don't know any
believe that.
artisans who are.
Yeah, I know that. I mean, from bottom of my heart, thanks to them, like a big time for putting up with me.
So this is going off on a tangent a little bit, but when you're in America, you grow up speaking American. And,
Right.
Yeah, and a little bit of Spanish if you are in one of those states, maybe Texas, maybe up in Chicago or out on the coast. But we always think of Europeans as having all of these different languages, and we were talking a little bit before we started the podcast about us both, or all three of us, essentially in one way or another, coming from areas of the world which were at a crossroads. So there were people of all nationalities coming and going. So, it is hard to grow up where we did and not have a few languages, because you have to communicate with everybody.
Yeah, right.
So I was just curious if you had some German when you went over there. And
No, not at all.
Yeah.
I mean, I spoke when I came in Germany for quite a few, actually 3 years, good 3 years, I was speaking English.
Yeah.
Because I couldn't pick up German accent whatsoever. That was difficult.
But with that language barrier, the instruction was still, because it was mostly showing you practical demonstration of how to go about doing a particular thing.
Right. Like I said again, they were extremely patient with me, and they would communicate English with me in the shop. And then little by little, I did show up an interest in German, and I told him, hey, talk to me in German. I want to learn, German phrases, German words. And that was actually 3 or 4 years I was pretty much with English. And later on, I picked up German decently enough that I could communicate with people. Now, if you ask me, I forgot a lot of things in, how to speak German, but I think it will come back to me in a matter of, a couple of days if I had a chance to be with the Germans and speak German. It would come pretty quickly.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I should have started this podcast by greeting you in your language and saying "Dobar dan." Yeah, but
That's good. That's really
because
good.
we were talking about my trip to that got canceled to the Balkans, and I started practicing a few of the phrases Havala, for being on the podcast and so on and so forth. So I completely understand the whole language. If you don't use it, you lose it. So,
Exactly.
Yeah. So I'll let Raj go with the question after this. But this is a question more from the music aficionado / newbie point of view. We can see YouTube videos of people working in their lutherie workshops, right? And you see this master craftsman who's been at it for 50 years or more. And they sit there and they pluck a string and they go like, it's a little off this way or what have you. And they tune the guitars, basically by ear. And so is it important to have perfect pitch or perfect relative pitch in order to practice your craft? How important is that, do you think?
Perfect pitch, you mean for the instrument, the
Yes.
tuning?
Yeah.
I think, it would be important, but I don't think it's necessary.
Okay.
Because, for example, I noticed one thing. For years, I would use like a tuning fork, right?
Right.
Or like a little tuning korg, to get to the 440 hertz note A, right?
Right.
And now, like, after so many years, like, I often catch myself, like, I just, tune the guitar, and I noticed, like, it's actually damn close to 440. It might be off, like, a few cents, and I'm thinking that must be the brain thing, you mean. It's just like you learning, like, how to hold a shovel or any tool. you need to hold the tool with a certain way. So you learn same thing, I think, about a pitch.
So you
It
train
kind of
your ear,
embeds
right?
in your mind the frequency itself,
Yeah.
and you hear it, and then you go no 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 no. Okay, I'm close, and then I really take a fork and I hit it up the edge of the table. Oh, sometimes I hit it right on, but it's not actually often. It comes close.
Very interesting.
Everything can be learned.
But to add on that, and Sasha can comment, but I do think it's beneficial or an additional benefit for a luthier to be a player also, as opposed to, and this is a layman's comment, but if you have that ear for playing and have that ear for music, I think it could only help if you're building an instrument as opposed to...
Right, yes.
That kind of leads me to my next question in terms of getting back to the whole concept of sound. So I'll tell sort of the infamous tale of, Antonio Stradivari.
Mm-hmm.
And with his violins, of course, they are touted that, he used a certain wood from a certain forest and then, used sap from certain trees to make the glue and everything else. And as a result, his instruments, as you said in the beginning of the talk, some instruments sound better than other instruments do. So what is that, as we say, je ne sais quoi, or that unknown of
what's magic?
What is the magic? I've always wanted to know, and is there even an answer to what are the key ingredients that create that sound that you're going after or create that magic?
I think maybe two components are important. I think that you have to have a really good wood. The better the wood, the better your instrument will be. So the wood has to be really, really nice quality. You can make a guitar out of like a lousy piece of wood. It's just going to be okay. But if you want something really good, you need to go around and knock on some, trunks and see how they resonate. Yes. So that's one component. The second component, you really have to have a passion to make an instrument. That's what I always had. I remember that. I remember that I just so love to make that stuff. And don't ask me why. I just don't know how to answer why. I just know I love it. I just love to dig into that and shape it and, flex it and feel it because it's a living thing.
Yeah.
It's not a dead thing. Once you cut a tree down, it's not dead. It's a still living organism.
And I have played Sasha's instruments, so I can say first-handed that magic is created for those reasons that he has described.
I wonder if you would say the same thing in '85 when I made a couple of guitars and give it to you. What would you say then?
Do you have any of those guitars from '85 still
No,
with you?
I'm sorry I interrupted you.
No, not at all. So the other, and this kind of ties again into the construction, but, we live in a modern era where, everything is made by, well, not everything,
CNC.
but everything is made by a machine, namely CNC. And for the listeners, maybe you can explain what that is, but in this modern era, you still make everything by hand. Is that correct?
Very much so. Yeah, I have power tools. I do. But the fine work and fine tuning is done by the hand. Yeah, I think and I feel like if I use a power tool, which I have, luckily to say I have power tools, but if I want to do some fine tunings with a palm sander, it can go too far. It can go too thin.
Can I ask you a question about, where you are right now? So do you take commissions to make guitars?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So let's say I come up to you and this is, I have an idea, but I want our listeners to have an idea too. So let's say I come up to you and I go, hey, Sasha, I would love to have you build me a guitar. You're not going to tell me, hey, come back in a couple of weeks and I'll have a guitar for you. Are you?
No, not really.
So how long on average does it take you, and how many hours of work does it take to, craft a guitar that you are able to give to a client and say, I think I've done a good job on this and I think you're going to like this?
Give or take, classical or steel string take about 120 hours to make.
120 hours of you in your workshop.
Yes, and an electric guitar or electric bass or any solid body instrument probably goes like a little under 100 hours, depending what people want. If they want a whole bunch of inlay in it, it will take longer. But that's a ballpark.
I see. When you take on a commission, does the client come up to you and say, okay, I want this, and this, well, I want you to use these kind of woods, etc. A lot of the woods, that were used, Brazilian rosewood comes to mind, or Hawaiian koa, those are exotic woods, kind of hard to source, etc. So how do you go about doing that?
I start with a communication with the customer first.
Okay.
Because I just can't do whatever I want.
Right.
The customer is always right. Okay. The customer is the one who tells me what he wants, what kind of sound. And they not only want a sound, they want it like we talked before. We are attracted by the look, right? They want a beautiful looking instrument. Sometimes they want a little different shape than what I have. But they want to look and they want a sound. They want it sounded right for them. And there's a lot of talk we have to do between each other. Because, I'm sort of, for them, at the same time as a guide. I'm trying to be a guide.
Right.
If you want bright sound, I will suggest you what kind of wood you should use. I'm here just to do suggestion. I'm not there to tell you what you want. You tell me what you want me to make, right? So that is pretty much a lot of communication. You want this much treble, you want this much bass, you want this much mid frequencies. So we go from there. And there's a lot of other things like based on the size of your hands, right? Do you prefer wider necks? Some people have a really large palms, large hands, and they want 2-inch nut. They cannot handle something which is 1 11/16 or 43 millimeters. They need something wider. So, physical size of instrument is important to everybody. So, yes, there's a lot of communication.
Sasha, you once, this is something you said, when I was, going through with you what woods to use for the classical guitar that you created for me. When it was finished and everything, and you handed it to me and I started playing it, you said, this guitar isn't really going to be what it's going to be for some time. And even though I think I know the answer, maybe you can tell the listeners what you mean by that.
The guitar does not like to be a guitar, okay? What I mean by it is actually the wood which is built into that guitar. So, it's a different woods. The back and sides are usually rosewood. The neck is mahogany. The fretboard is ebony. The top is spruce. There's a bunch of bracing inside. And on top of it, some steel melted in and some strings stretched over. So it's a correlation between steel and wood, right? Now, we don't know for steel. We know, but for steel, strings and frets and other metal parts, it's a different story. But that wood really doesn't like to be the guitar. It doesn't. And there's a Rumi, and Rumi is a famous poet. You know it, right? He, I don't know if I can quote, but he said once about a flute. The flute was something else before the knives drilled it. Okay. The wood, that's very deep. The wood actually suffered, right? Suffered drilling and very harsh, carving.
Bending and
And then after all that, like a harsh thing happened to it, all of a sudden, the wood is just singing.
yeah.
It's very deep. Rumi is the one.
Yes.
So the wood does not like to be in the guitar in the beginning. So the wood wants to resist. Sides are bent and forced by heat and by knives and whatnot. So they kind of resisting till they give up.
Yeah.
And they accept new shape. So the green guitar is what I gave you back then. Basically, just like fresh from the shop, right?
Yeah.
So what happens, the wood is still trying to adapt to the, frequencies, hit from the string, like the top one doesn't really wants to bounce it much. But what happened actually inside, and a lot of people don't know that. So you have a top and the back, right? Mm-hmm. And when you pluck the string, people really don't think about it like I didn't 40 years ago. So when you pluck the string, the top and back goes this way, right? Especially the top. Top dances. And that bridge, which is on the glued on the top, is actually like a little boat on the surface of the lake, right? So any little motion to that boat, it makes the bridge boat dances, right? Mm-hmm. And it moves the surface of that, whatever it is, membrane, in this case is a top. Yeah. It's about 1/10 of an inch thick in the guitar, classical or steel string world. So as that top is like doing this, right? You have to understand that the guitar is an enclosed object. It's a limited object, so it has a bent sides.
Right.
Glue it back, and the top is glued on the top of it, right? So it's able to flex itself, top and back. But there's a sound hole, right?
Right.
So there's a sound that air can go through the sound hole inside all over the cavity of the box. And what we don't realize is as we pluck the string, the top goes this up and down and actually heats the air inside. The air inside is heated up by the two membranes doing this, right? Constantly. And we can't see the movement, right? But yes, the top is doing flexing all the time. And it's heating up the air. Then it's not hot air.
Yeah.
But it's a warmed up air, right?
So it rises.
That too, but that warmer air actually in those corners where the side is glued to the top, there's a curving in a corner. The warm air is actually heating up the glue. And glue softens up, and that's why you need an hour of playing your guitar. And when you sit at first moment, you say it's kind of a little, stiff. It's like a kind of a little sleepy. And after an hour of constant playing, you what I just explained, your guitar is opening up. So opening up your instrument is more alive because you heated up the air inside and it loosened those joints of glue. And if the guitar is made right, if it's thin enough to allow all these, motions and movements, you go, it sounds better. Now you know.
Yeah, that's fascinating.
So that's fascinating, and that probably also explains why people like B.B. King or Willie Nelson would hang on to their guitars, beat up Lucille, or trigger, I guess, was Willie Nelson's guitar with the hole in it and all that stuff, and they're unwilling to part with.
Exactly. And you can only imagine what happens after 80 years of such a guitars being played.
Right.
Heat it up. That's it.
Yeah. So
Wonderful.
I have put Raj in a similar spot, and we grow up thinking of guitars as essentially American instruments, or American guitars are well known, other than classical guitars, which probably have a history from Spain. And so, do you have like if somebody was to ask you and say, hey, I would like to buy a guitar, and most of us opt for American classics like a Martin or a Taylor or what have you. Do you have any favorite acoustic guitar makers that you particularly favor, that you like their technique, or the instruments that they
I like them all, actually. Yeah, I like a Martin, good old Gibson, good old Gretsch.
Yeah.
Taylors. You name it.
Yeah.
You name it. I mean,
C.F. Martin has a history of, much like yourself, came here from Austria, started a little lutherie shop, and then, it grew up into, the big shop it is now. Have you thought about, because it is a whole different thing to produce artisanal guitars. And it's a completely different story to say, okay, I'm going to make a business out of it, which is going to turn a profit. I'm going to employ craftsmen or, people who work but are not as passionate about that because they're just doing a 9-to-5 job or however it is. So that is a different way of dealing with it.
Totally different.
Yeah. So as you said earlier when we were talking, that it is very much a passion for you. This is something that gives you inner peace, that satisfies your creative instinct and helps you with this desire for creativity and for making something. Mm-hmm. So, you've never thought about, turning it into a business, in the strictly profit-making sense of the word?
That is, it's a really interesting question. I don't know actually what to tell you, but I know one thing. If you want to be a big businessman, you have to have a big money.
Yeah.
You have to have a big investment into, because it's not only 5 guitars per se. I can make 5 guitars a year. It's not a problem. But if you want to make 5,000 guitars, that's a whole another story, which means you have to employ 100 people. It's not like 3-4 guys. You have to employ a lot of employees, right? That's the difference between businessman, in a real sense of meaning of the word businessman. The guy really has to have a lot of money to start a factory. So I'm not sure if I want that. Right. I'm not really sure, because it's kind of a tough question, really. So far, I prefer to, begin the guitar from zero and to finish it from A to Z. I'm not yet there to, let's say, start making an instrument and, somebody else is going to put the neck on. I just don't have a nerves for that. I kind of control freak. I need to know, is it really made well to the last point? Mm-hmm. It's not that I don't trust, people. It's a mental thing. I don't know if I'm right.
I understand completely. So, which is also...
We are all selfish.
Right.
But I think that's what sets you apart from everyone else. And that's my personal opinion. I think that if the passion isn't there, then the quality suffers in the end. And I think, when it comes to such not only intricate work, but precise work and, the knowledge of what you do, I think that's key. But that's just my opinion.
So when I did the podcast with Raj as my guest, I was telling him the story about me being in Spain, and I found myself in Granada. And I had just gotten into guitars. In Granada, as you know, you walk down the street and there's lutheries on either side of it. Small workshops, which are smaller than the size of this room that we are in. And, most of the guys are working on the guitars. They also own the place. They've got their own brand, much like you do. But a lot of the places that I visited had apprentices who were learning the trade craft. Yeah, and I was just curious if you have had apprentices. Is that something that you would consider? If somebody were to come up and say, "Hey, I want to learn how to make a guitar. Can you help me with that?" So it was just something I was curious about.
Yeah, I was apprentice myself. I don't know if you knew that, but several years back. In the past, I used to run guitar making school, actually.
Oh, I did not know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was from roughly 2000 to 2009. And I had a...
Was that here in St. Louis?
Yeah, it was here in St. Louis, yes. It was called European Lutherie School. I probably told you about that a long time ago. So that's how I actually started business. I actually wanted to start a business. I didn't know where I was going to go, but just for the heck of it, I opened a school for teaching people how to make guitars. And that was located on the Chippewa Street, close to Hampton. So, yeah, that was the interesting, very, very interesting period of life that I actually realized, what does it mean to control and supervise 5 or 6 people trying to make something out of the wood. And at the end, about somewhere about 2008 and 2009, I realized this is really a tough job. And I decided I don't think I can continue doing this because my mind is scattered over the many other things like designs, how it should sound, what guitar should look like, what should I do to improve the sound. So I decided to just, abandon everything and move my shop to my home. And that actually what happened. At the same time, coincidence was that, I did not have enough students to support my business. So that happened as well. So and then combining those, couple of things, like I just described, made me, to decide just to close down the guitar making school.
So can I ask you something?
Yes.
While I was doing a little bit of research, for our conversation today, I came across several websites which are lutherie schools, right? In your opinion, let's not go to where, you become a master craftsman where you're at, but, to be able to be a competent luthier, if somebody were to start with a little bit of woodworking experience, how long do you think it takes before somebody gets to the point, if they truly have an interest and are doing it full time, for them to be able to start making serviceable instruments that are, that don't have technical flaws or.
I think it depends on a person. It really does. We're all different, and I'm thinking the correct answer would be, again, it depends on a person. For example, I know people who really learned, guitar making trades so quickly that I was like, it was drop a jaw, to the floor. That fast they are doing this. Yes.
Yeah.
And in my case, no, I'm kind of slow.
Yeah.
It takes me all my life to figure things. I did not have a, education, how to build instruments, so I learned the hard way, trial and error, which, if you don't know what it means, means this. you're basically going to screw up a lot of pieces of wood till you get something in your Kopf, which would be German name for the head. So trial and error, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's it, pretty much. Some people are fast, some are not. I'm not. In my case, I told you, I started in 1980, so quite a few years to
40 years at least, yeah.
yeah.
But it's that trial and error experience that really helps you in terms of the repair and restoration aspect of your
Yes,
work.
it pretty much pertains on as well on building as well on repairs. What you need is a source of the instruments, like a large amount of different problems in the guitar repair world that you have to see and experience. Because if you don't, what's the point? Which means you have to do so many repairs in order to learn something. It is very simple.
There may not be an answer.
Experience is everything.
Yeah, for sure. And there may not be an answer to this question, but if you had your dream choices of wood to make an instrument, what would they be?
The dream? Yeah. I'm kind of Brazilian rosewood junkie. No, I'm just kidding. I love maple, rosewoods in general. I like. My passion is actually the spruce, the top, which is that is the vital part of the acoustic instrument. So yes. But another interesting thing is, like, I used to think it's only important in acoustic instrument or classical guitar, but it's so much important in electric guitar. You would not believe it.
The spruce, huh?
Remember?
Which you don't, yes, oh yeah.
Yeah. One of the, what was the brand? Was it Carvin? That has a spruce body?
I'm not sure.
I'm not sure either, but electric guitar, for example, the body was solid spruce, veneered with the bubinga or something similar to rosewood on both sides, on the outsides.
Yeah, that's unusual.
That's unusual, right? But then I got like, how come I didn't think of that? So everybody is different. So people thinking, So yes.
So spruce from a particular region in the world, or just any kind of?
I had a privilege to work with all kind of spruces, which are known. Sitka, red spruce from Adirondack Mountains, Alaskan cedar, western red cedar, what's the name of the cypress from the Mediterranean, and cypress from the California Bay, and they're all different.
Are they?
And there's there's a good wood and there's a better wood. There's a excellent wood. So, like I said, my privilege. I was born in a country that yields the best spruce for the top of and the back and sides of the guitars. Stradivari, by the way, you mentioned it earlier. He preferred to make his violins with Bosnian maple and Bosnian spruce. Bosnian spruce is very different spruce than spruce coming from Germany or from Norwegian area or, what do I know, Russia or Ukraine or Uzbekistan, I don't know. There's spruces all over the, world.
So one of the questions I had was about the trees that are used to source this wood. Does the tree have to be of a particular age before it is harvested for this? I know that a lot of the people who are sourcing woods, especially the exotic woods, are also conserving the woods by replanting trees, making sure that there are supplies in the future for similar purposes. But how old, on average, are trees before they're harvested, for wood, and are they harvested specially for making instruments?
How old? For example, I know for example, spruce for the top of steel string or classical guitar, we usually do like a book match, like a 2 halves. So 1 half, it has to be about 20 centimeters wide, which is about, 8 inches?
Yeah, somewhere
give or
in that
take,
range, yeah.
right? So that means that there's so if this is a wood, right, the trunk, so there is a heart. And we usually avoid a little piece around the center of the wood, of the trunk. And so that's, let's say this is like a few inches, and then you have this healthy area on the left and right from the center, from the heart of the tree. So that's the one I'm talking pretty much 8-inch wide or 20 centimeter. So if you calculate, so this is like a 20 centimeters, and then there's another 8, and there's another 20 on the other side, right? So we're talking about a 40, 50 centimeter, half meter trunk. Now, if you don't forget, the tree has a bark, right? There's another sapwood close to the bark. So we're talking about trunk. This is about, I would say, 80 centimeter wide. The tree, which means the tree you can't really hug with your 2 hands.
Right.
Which means, I don't know exactly, I never counted like a number of rings on the top. I could tell you next time when I get home, but I'm believing it's probably 80 years or 100 years old, maybe more.
So the reason I bring that up is because, unfortunately, when the consumer is removed from the actual manufacturing process and the sourcing process, then we tend to forget that, we go into Guitar Center and there's, 300 guitars lined up.
Yeah.
And, it is easy to forget that the instrument not only has a history in of itself, but the wood that is used in the instrument has a history of its own as well.
You're right.
Yeah. And that, we may balk at paying whatever, $2,000 for a guitar or $4,000.
No. It's a $300 in Guitar Center.
Yeah, well, that's a whole different story, right? Which actually brings me to the next question. But I was just going to remark on the fact.
Joking.
Yeah, I understand. But the guitars that are worth that much money are because they are rare items, and they have taken a lot of time to get from where they started to this finished product that ends up in our hands, right? So, which brings me to this question that I was thinking about. And, it is probably inappropriate to ask since we've been, waxing poetic about the romantic history of guitar manufacturing. But what do you think about, using the synthetic materials that are being used to manufacture some guitars now? As you know, there are carbon fiber guitars. I think Kloss guitars comes to mind. And then there's Pau Ferro used for the fretboard instead of
Rain Song. I know. Yeah.
So
Rich Light.
So and also a lot of the guitars that are coming in, the $300 guitars that you were talking about, a lot of those are glued together laminates as well. Instead of this solid 1-piece or 2-piece tops that you were talking about. So. Your thoughts on that? Are you a traditionalist, or are you saying, well, let me see how it sounds? I don't know what a Rain Song guitar sounds like. I haven't played one, so
It sounds metallic. That
it?
was my impressions. Yes, I'm in that regard. I'm just traditionalist because I don't think that we can beat the nature, how the nature is able to create things, which is in this case wood, right? I don't think we can make it. I've seen some stuff in Home Depot that are like supposed to look like wood, and you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
It's that deck material.
Right.
I don't know what is that material.
I'm not sure what it's called. Yeah.
But people often usually look me kind of strange because I go in Home Depot because I often buy some wood, And my first thing to do is like pick it and I tap
Knock on it.
it. And they go like,
What is this?
who is this guy? Like, you know what I'm saying? Yeah, I am traditionalist. I don't think I could pick up like a carbon fiber and put it into this, in the guitar. I just can't.
That's just not you.
It's just not my cup of tea. I love wood. It's just the natural stuff, and believe me, it has some sound in it.
So is there a particular guitar that you've made for anybody that you remember fondly and, that just came out fantastic and you just looked at it and it still stays with you in your memory? And
After you make so many guitars, they all kind of dear to me. And at the same time, I kind of forget them sort of quickly. It's a weird thing. Because, but interestingly enough, the first one when I made in 1980, I still remember that one and one of the acoustics that I made. I remember selling it back then. And after that, you start making one after another, one after another, one after another. And it's like, I have to look in my notebook to see what I made.
yeah.
But I mean, yes, they're all dear to me, basically. Yes. There's no preference.
So, people like Raj, who have not only, who are not only musicians themselves, but have an interest in the history of guitar making and, the sounds, etc. They can probably listen to an instrument on a recording and go like, yeah, that sounds like a Strat, or that sounds like a particular brand. Would you be able to identify your guitars if you heard them, played? If you walked into a bar and somebody was playing a guitar, would you be able to say, that sounds like one of mine?
I don't think so.
No.
I don't know.
Yeah.
That's an interesting question. I'm not sure if I could, because there's so much alike. The other day I was like watching a YouTube clips. I have a little bitty issue. I want to exchange some pickups on one of my guitars that I made, and I wasn't happy with the pickup. What is it doing with this certain wood? Because the wood on that electric was way too bright. It's such a wood, bright. And I put, some kind of pickups inside, and I didn't realize it quite fast. But after a while I was playing, I was like, it's a little bit goddamn sharp. I mean, brash. So I took them out and put another one and say, well, this is better. So I'm not going back to those pickups, okay? So yes, it's important. Very much so.
Now, earlier you had brought up, the whole thing about how, once the guitar is made and the wood has had a chance to breathe, then it kind of becomes its own. Now, again, going back to, and boy, you could probably spend a whole hour on this topic, but, vintage instruments, so to speak. Is it the wood that was used to make those instruments that create again, to use the word magic, the magic
sound
associated with it? Or is it the fact that they have aged in the way that you describe, kind of coming into their own, being played for 50 years?
I think it's a big, it's a good point. I think that all guitars which are like 50 years and older, they will play better, no matter what. They will, because wood is matured. Wood is actually shrunk to the thinnest possible dimension, which means lost all the water, which means it's like I said, heated up from inside out 1,000 times. It's musically cooked, so to speak.
More resonant, maybe warmer in sound.
Yes, the interesting, let me answer this way also. I was in Chicago at my friend's shop, Richard Brunet, and he handed me like a $250,000 Antonio Torres classical, yes. So I was able to play that guitar, and that guitar is like made in 1800, let's say 70. How old is that? That's very old.
It's
It's 100.
150.
Plus.
Yeah, 150 years
And
old. Yeah.
there was something in it. I mean, in that sounded like, oh my God! It's just that's not a green wood
So it's
sound.
true.
It's
Yeah,
true. Yes.
yeah.
I agree with you because I have a Taylor 800 series that I've had for 30 years now or somewhere.
30?
Yeah.
There you go.
And when I acquire a new guitar, I usually don't play them because I play it and it sounds nothing like the Taylor.
Of course.
You know, in the richness of its sound. And people go, so how do you like that Gibson? And I go like, yeah, but it's not that Taylor. But now I know why it's not. So, you know, that gives me an insight into things.
Totally true. That's correct. And I always tell people, well, you will have to grow in. It's just like a shoes, new shoes. You put them on, they're a little stiff, right?
Right.
You have to walk like a couple 100 miles till they fit to your leg, right?
Yeah, so I have the solution is that you buy all the guitars that you need when you're 5 years old.
Yes.
That way, when you get to be of age, they would have.
Yeah, your parents would have to buy your guitars. My parents would not have bought me any guitars.
Mine neither.
I can tell you that. They would have bought me textbooks, but a guitar, not a
Yes,
chance.
it's very helpful for guitar to be like aged wood inside. They, as a matter of fact, they do now torrefied wood. You know,
Yes.
they sound a little bit better. Yes, and also, you know, it really depends who makes them. It's the maker.
Yeah. Yeah.
How he is skillful to feel out like how thick the top and bracing relation between bracing and the top thickness. I mean, there's a lot of things. So basically, yes, it's true. Age is very important.
Well, Sasha, we're coming to an end of our conversation here. I don't want to impose on your time too much. Do you have a website or a way that people can get a hold of you if they want to commission a guitar from you? How would they be able to get in touch with you?
Yes, I do have. Indeed, this is a kind of old website, but it's www.radicic-guitar-zitter.com.
Okay.
So kind of complicated to remember, but radicic-guitar-zitter.com.
Right. And we'll, you know, when I put this up on YouTube, we'll put a link to your website.
Okay, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yes. So thank you very much for being with us here today. This was a pleasure for me personally to have both of you and to have this conversation. And I wish you the best of luck in your endeavors. And I learned a lot from our conversation today.
Thank you very much for having me, and such a pleasure to know you.
Yeah.
Sasha,
Thank you,
always good to
Raj.
see you. And
Absolutely.
you know, lifted up some of the mysteries that I've always, you know, had on guitar making. So I thank you for that, and thank you for your friendship as well.
Absolutely. Same here, man. Same here.
And thanks, Raj, for co-hosting and taking some of the burden off my shoulders today. And I look forward to us doing more of the same in the days to come.
Thanks for the opportunity, Wakas. It's
Have a great
always
day,
a pleasure.
everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.